All right, Supervisor Rabbitt, Supervisor Hopkins, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Steve.
I
Appreciate it.
understand that yesterday evening there was a town hall that the two of you helped to organize to take a look at business, especially in the county, to kind of take questions, to put at ease some of the people who may have major concerns right now. Can the two of you tell me kind of some of the headlines of what came out of your meeting yesterday? Perhaps Linda, I can ask you first.
Yeah, the focus, unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball to say exactly when different sectors of our economy will reopen for business. But our goal was to really give people a sense of how the decisions can be made going forward. And so we are proud to announce that we are working in close partnership with the business community through our Economic Development Board to develop best management practices that can be implemented in all of our different small businesses in order to keep employees safe, customers and clients safe, and also to protect the public health of our community as a whole. Now, this is being done under the guidance of our public health department. And so we actually had Dr. Mace issue an overarching set of guidelines regarding how to reduce transmission risk in individual businesses. But that's still sort of in the arena of public health. And the goal of the Economic Development Board is to actually translate that into what that means, in real life, out in a small business in Sonoma County. So what would that look like in a bookstore? What could that look like in, a restaurant with respect to dine-in services? What are those mitigation measures that will be required for businesses to safely reopen in Sonoma County?
All right, David, for you, what was the headline of yesterday? What were you hearing from business owners? What were you able to tell them about the way things are now going forward?
Well, I think anytime there's a disaster such as we're experiencing, people just want information. They just want to know what is happening. Are we working towards reopening? What criteria need to be met in order to get there? And so I think it was really important to be able to provide that information and also give a little background regarding the relationship to the county order to the state order, for instance. We've been struggling with where the state was in terms of businesses that were essential or non-essential, and there was no in between. And those were really definitions that came out of Washington, D.C. and don't necessarily always have everything to do with health risk. So it's been something that's been frustrating, I think, for both Supervisor Hopkins and myself and the entire board, really, is that we'd really rather have a risk-based approach where we can look at activities related to the associated health risk and then mitigate them to the best degree possible going forward. But I feel good about where we're at as a county and the conversations that we've had. And yesterday was another step along the way. And I thank Supervisor Hopkins for allowing me to crash her party and to join her on that Facebook Live.
All right, thank you so much. Now, let's have some specific questions that have come to us from some of our viewers about business. These first few are. So where are we at now with short-term vacation rentals? Will that continue to be restricted as it has been to the 30 days that people can't rent for less than 30 days? So the usual sort of Airbnb weekend rentals are still off the table. Lynda, what's happening? Especially, I know a lot of folks in West County have those vacation rentals.
So short-term vacation rentals operating for tourism purposes are prohibited by the current shelter-in-place order. And unless the state changes its mind between now and Friday, I don't anticipate any changes being made to that as the state moves forward into phase 2 of the reopening of our California statewide economy. We do unfortunately continue to receive reports of violations, and if anyone is aware of a vacation rental operating in violation of a shelter-in-place order, they can call the non-emergency local law enforcement hotline. And in unincorporated Sonoma County, a lot of the areas that I represent, that is 565-2121.
All right, thank you so much. We will make sure that people have that information to call if there are people who are not following the rules. Here's another question that came in from our viewers. It's about something that you might be finding out just today when the governor is making some new rules. And it says, when will restrictions on retail stores be lifted? Will businesses be able to open with precautions or at least curbside pickup? What have you understood? Where's the governor going on this, David?
Well, I understand that specific guidance will be put out on Thursday, but in order to go in effect on Friday, that there is talk of retail curbside sales or pickups to be able to happen. Although, you know, obviously that works well for some stores, it doesn't work well for all stores. I can think of my own downtown Petaluma, and there's a boutique, excuse me, clothing shop, you know, that really does rely on people dropping in. So there's some movement forward, which we very much appreciate, but it's not quite there yet. And to the second point of that is that you know, the mitigation measures that everyone is putting in place. So, you know, business is going to look different going forward, and businesses will adapt. And I think the other thing that we learned the other night was that businesses are up to the challenge. They want to adapt. Survival is a great motivator. They want to be able to open up. They know physical distancing, facial coverings, and specific to their store, whatever they need to do, be it limit customers in the shop at one time, put up a screen between themselves and the registers where you're closer than that 6-foot piece. So I think they're really willing to step up in that regard. So it's going to be interesting to see how these things can get rolled out and what effect it will have here in Sonoma County.
All right, Lynda, let me ask you this question. Someone is concerned. They say there are transients who are living in an RV parked in our residential neighborhood. They've moved in there in the last 4 days. How are the county sheriffs, how are law enforcement reacting when there are transients who are living, say, in an RV in someone's lot or in someone's neighborhood? Is this allowed, and what should be done?
Well, if the transients are genuinely unsheltered homeless people who have nowhere else to go, the CDC guidelines are actually not to displace people from encampments, but to try to, kind of provide them with what they need in order to be there safely and in a way that does not negatively impact the public health. That is why the county has taken a leadership role in providing sanitation stations, so hand washing facilities, as well as porta potties around at various homeless encampments. We are also moving forward aggressively to try to find broader solutions. Do we have an opportunity to invest in some infrastructure that could permanently house unsheltered homeless individuals? Might we consider looking at some safe parking options if, for instance, we are seeing an increased prevalence of RVs in neighborhoods? So all of those things are on the table, and we are trying to work to make sure that, we don't see large encampments take root, even though we recognize that we can't just go in and disrupt an encampment, because scattering people is a very dangerous thing to do in the middle of a pandemic.
All right, Lynda, and here's another question that came in to us that I might ask if you can answer. The county parks are now open, but only if you can bike or walk to them. And this person asks, they say half the county is being punished for not living near a park or perhaps living in a rural area. So how is this fair?
So I want to be very honest. This is not fair. We are not living in a world where we can really make decisions that only focus on fairness. And it's an extremely frustrating place to be in for those of us who are in leadership positions. And I know that this is something that weighs very heavily on our public health officer, Dr. Mace, and our director of regional parks, Bert Whitaker, who are really instrumental in the decisions surrounding the parks orders that have come out. And right now we're in a situation where this is creating inequity. I represent a lot of constituents who cannot safely walk or bike to a park. I represent a lot of constituents who live in Southwest Santa Rosa, which has some of the lowest kind of parks per capita ratios of anywhere in Sonoma County. And unfortunately, we are in a place where we are having to make least worst decisions rather than best decisions. And this was one of those instances. I do know, though, that we are hard at work trying to come up with mitigation measures that will allow people to actually drive to parks. I recognize the burden that the sort of white walking and biking rule places on some of the seniors in our community. Also people like myself who have young children that can't walk very far. Also people like myself who live in rural areas where we don't have sidewalks. So actually to walk or bike would be a very risky sort of place to take your young children. So it is not a fair rule or a fair order. And I want to acknowledge that and note that we are working to make something better. But I think it's also important to remember that the reason this unfair rule is in place is to protect the public health. And that what we want to do is gradually loosen restrictions over time. If we open up Pandora's box and we change a bunch of things all at once, and we see a spike in cases, then we have to put everything back into the box. Whereas if we over time kind of gradually loosen in thoughtful ways that still protect the public health, that's how we can make sure that we're keeping a grip on COVID-19 in Sonoma County and we're not seeing runaway case and community transmission.
Okay, and here's one, David, that I'll ask you because we have many questions coming into us about the agricultural sector and especially the health and safety of farm workers. And this particular question asks, are there specific health and safety guidelines for agricultural workers in our area? And is the Board of Supervisors feeling good about protecting the health and safety of the people who we depend on to pick grapes, to do all the other hard work that allows us to have a robust agricultural sector?
Yeah, no, there definitely are the requirements out there for all workers, and it doesn't matter if you're working in a field or if you're working, quite frankly, in a grocery store. It's the facial coverings, it's the social distancing, it's the hygiene, the hand washing stations, agricultural sector leaders that I've talked to report back that there's daily briefings on how best to make sure that you're safe. And those are good things going forward. That's how we're going to have to operate for the mid future, at least going forward, until there's a therapeutic, political vaccine to this virus. So I think we feel confident that in as much as we are all taking care of ourselves and all implementing the best management practices, that's been happening in the agricultural sector as well. It's important for everyone to take care of their employees, to take care of themselves, and it's important for the employees to also take responsibility. And there are certain challenges. Proximity sometimes can be an issue. It's depending on where people live and how they commute. But those are things that are being addressed, and I think that goes back to what Supervisor Hopkins said about how to implement the best management practices within each sector of the economy. Because again, only will they in the agricultural sector really know what they have to deal with on a daily basis and how they can take that, proximity, the duration of contacts and the number of contacts and minimize all of those to make sure that they can keep people safe going forward.
All right, finally, I would like to ask both of you, as you're planning for the future, what you're hearing from economists and from others about the resources that will be available to the county, and if we are having to live with far fewer resources, how we're going to recover going forward from this pandemic. Perhaps I'll ask you to start, Lynda.
I think that we are at a pivotal moment in history. We are living through an unprecedented global phenomenon. The last time that, the world experienced a pandemic of this magnitude, we didn't have planes. Most people didn't have cars. A virus now has the potential to spread much more rapidly than it ever did in the past when we faced down something like this. And so, in as much as we have this kind of global catastrophe that we don't quite know how far down the trough will go in terms of the economy, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen when we start pulling these levers and we start loosening these restrictions. How far can we go to restart our economy before we reach that tipping point and we start to see exponential rise in our local cases again? But so as dire as it may feel to read some of those news reports, to read some of those analyses regarding the skyrocketing unemployment rates, I also actually have a lot of hope. And I have a lot of hope because I continue to see the creative, kind spirit of Sonoma County residents time and time again. The distilleries down in Supervisor Rabbitt's district, they're repurposing themselves to produce hand sanitizer. The neighbors who are just checking in and dropping off food or homemade masks on the porches of their friends and family members. People going just to sort of, wave through the window, even if they can't touch one another, and give each other hugs on a birthday. And so I really do believe we're going to get through this together. And I do believe that we're going to bounce back. And I actually think that Sonoma County's economy is poised to recover fairly quickly once we get the green light, right? We have been a place that people have loved to come, even in times of stress, especially in times of stress. You want to return to something that's familiar, that has beautiful places, that has good food, that has great wine. And we do have those things. And so I'm hopeful that when we can start to reopen business, that, our locals will go out and support our local stores, and that just folks from around the Bay Area will come and support our businesses as well. But at the end of the day, what's going to get through this is that kindness, that resilience, and that can-do spirit that Sonoma County residents have.
Supervisor Rabbitt, I'll give you the last word.
I think what's true is the foundation of our economy was strong. We went into this not because of the stereotypical economic indicators we're going to predict a recession, but because we purposely stopped the economy. So it's different than, I say, 2008 or in 89 when there were recessions in the past. So it'll be interesting as we come out. I do think that duration and depth really matter, how long this will go on and how quick we can get people back. It'll definitely be a financial hit, and I'm not underestimating what's happened to really a minority of folks that were caught in those businesses that weren't allowed to go forward, that lost revenue, that lost paychecks. But again, I would say the foundation of our economy was strong, and that hasn't necessarily changed yet. Again, if we can get through this period of time and get ourselves across and adapt our business models going forward, we can escape severe damage. I still think it's going to take a while to catch up, but I think it's just different than a stereotypical recession in that, again, the indicators weren't the same, but it's really about how quickly can we move forward, open up as many businesses, get paychecks to people as quickly as possible. We're still going to have to take all the precautions to combat the virus going forward, but I hope that our economy, while we'll take a hit, can be lessened somewhat because of those circumstances.
All right, Supervisor David Rabbitt, Supervisor Lynda Hopkins, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for taking the time.